Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, The Measure of a Mountain, Beauty and Terror on Mount Rainier. There's a few things to note about this book. First of all, this is one of those books I purchased in 2018 or 2019. I read this before my summer working at that summer camp in 2019 that I've talked about in other videos. It has several authors that I don't recognize, perhaps because the subject matter of their books is the Pacific Northwest, and that's not a region I've read too much about. As I said, I purchased this for $6, and it's a pretty good $6 well spent. I'll discuss why in this video. The text is copyright 1997, and this is the first Ballantine Books edition, October 1998. The cover design is by Heather Kern, but the cover photo is by Paul Cecil and Tony Stone Images. This book isn't just a description of the mountain, Mount Rainier, but also historical context and contemporary usage. It is an all-encompassing book about Mount Rainier. And I have Bruce Barcott, the author, to thank for this. The first chapter discusses it geologically, so its context as a volcano in the United States, the largest and most dangerous. It discusses how high above sea level it rises, 14,410 feet, which is only 23 feet shorter than Mount Elbert, which is the tallest mountain in Colorado and the tallest mountain in the Rocky Mountains, which I hiked to the top of just in July of 2023. So this is really close in height. It is one of those few mountains in the United States, the continental United States, that are above 14,400 feet. More than 2 million people visit Rainier each year. 10,000 try to climb it, and little more than half of them succeed. That's the stats at the time of writing this, so 25 years ago. It is very likely higher, and in some ways lower now. On a clear morning, the mountain can be seen from Canada to Oregon, from the San Juan Islands to Spokane. On cloudy afternoons, its form remains visible on personal checks, decorative porcelain, framed postcards, bottled water, billboard ads, and the license plate of every vehicle registered in the state of Washington. And then it goes into the spiritual history as a religious and spiritually prominent figure in Northwestern Native American culture, and follows up with the issue of naming it. Today it still goes by Mount Rainier, but this chapter discusses the efforts to rename it to something like Mount Tacoma, which would be more culturally significant. But as I said, it remains Mount Rainier. Now, I've visited Seattle twice in my life, and both times it was a clear enough week that on a daily basis I could see Mount Rainier from Seattle. And when I first saw it, we were just coming out of a canyon on Interstate 90, and there was a kind of sloping rise, and as you get over that, you can see in the distance a mountain, snow-capped in July, and we pulled over on the interstate to just look at our atlas and realize we're 90 miles away as the crow flies, and we can see this gigantic mountain in the distance. We had driven from Maryland all the way to Seattle area to Washington, and we knew how tall the Rocky Mountains could be on the horizon, but seeing a lone mountain far taller than anything else and with a near mountain range in the foreground and this mountain another 30 miles distant towering over the rest was breathtaking. So that is how impressive this mountain is. And there are so many other ways that make it even more impressive and majestic and magnificent. There's a good moment about 151 pages in the chapter titled Camp Muir, named after John Muir, who is the founder of the Sierra Club and is a phenomenal figure in preservationist and conservationist history. It is he who really pushed to preserve the natural beauty that is Yosemite National Park. So Camp Muir is named after him despite being in a mountain park hundreds of miles from where Yosemite currently is. I was curious to read the thoughts of climbers at 14,000 feet to see how they wanted to be remembered to the mountain. So I pulled some registers from the archive. I chose 1991 and for a round 50-year comparison, 1941, and spent an afternoon browsing through other people's experiences. The 1941 register contains the clipped speech and quaint slang of the era, and its short comments reveal something else: the absence of personal glory. Jim Beebe, July 20th, 1941, Fooey. Bob Powell, July 20th, cold as the devil, also a heck of a long hike. Bob Glantel, age 22, August 2nd, 1941, too much wind, I'm leaving. B. H. Britton, age 24, Bayonne, New Jersey, August 11th, 1941, damn tired. D. Molinar, age 23, August 24, 1991, cold as hell, arrived 5:30 a.m., 10.5 hours from paradise. Lean H. Brigham Jr., age 21, August 24th, 1941, killed on Russell Glacier, August 10th, 1941, ashes brought here August 24th, 1941, W. McClure Jr., leader. 50 years later, Rainier's summiteers had turned into literary exhibitionists. Climbers thank their friends and loved ones in nicknames and catchphrases. Personal milestones are marked: a first climb, a 40th birthday, a moment of silence for partners who died before they could climb Mount Rainier. RMI guides mark their latest climb in rhyme. Muscle fatigue, mental lassitude, and hand-chilling cold are reflected in unpunctuated sentences, misspelled words, and the poor decision to paraphrase Led Zeppelin at 14,000 feet. And through many comments comes the constant chorus of our age. Hey, everybody, look at me. This section is a bit long, as he indicated, so I'm not going to read all of them, but July 2nd, 91, Tim Kinchin, in loving memory of my father who tried but never made the summit. He is always on tops with me. July 6th, 91, my mom did it in the 1930s, so I had to do it too. Maybe someday my daughter can read this. It's fun to wave home from here. Dana Gross, Portland, Oregon. July 7th, 91, Jason M. Schrodel. Well, I'm 9 years old. This is the highest peak I've ever climbed. The only other glacier peak I've climbed is Hood. Well, bye. And then later, I asked the archivist if I could photocopy this one. He said he thought it would be okay. What the text says is stupid, 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 with an arrow pointing at the person, an arrow pointing at their butt saying my ass, Mount Rainier, affectionately drawn with legs and a boot, and the boot is kicking his ass, and it says, but I made it. Something Stewart, June 16th, 92. So that happened a year later, but the guy, the author loved that image so much that he photocopied it and shared it with everyone else. And then, like so many other books on this channel, there is the build up to this thing that you love so dearly, and then all the research that goes into thinking about it, and then finally the success of completing the challenge. American Buffalo did it really well, where the author, decided to contextualize his own personal history with bison, as well as the history of interactions of bison, hunting bison, throughout the centuries, and then finally the hunt of an American bison, where he managed to procure 4 bison legs and some bison meat at the cost of frostbite and months of physical therapy. There are other books that I've discussed that are in my library, in this bookshelf, that are very similar. And so this book, the last 50 or so pages, is covering the author's own personal attempt to get to the top of Mount Rainier. And very similarly, perhaps ironically, I don't think the author registers this, but despite kind of condescending towards the hikers in 1991 that wrote entire poems up in the logbook, this author wrote an entire book and even says, "Still there remained the summit, the only part of the mountain I didn't know. And there was my father. More than anything, in the end I decided to climb for him. My father was born in the mill town of Everett, Washington, graduated from Everett High School, went to Washington State University, and courted a girl from Everett. After graduation, they returned to Everett and got married." The book ends with the author's return to Camp Muir. It says, "I saw my father, standing near the Muir guide hut, apart from the crowd, sunning themselves on the rocks. He squinted into the sun and tried to pick me out of the necklace moving across the glacier. I have never been so happy to see him. After taking the last few steps, I unlocked my carabiner and hugged him as I've never hugged him before, and said over and over, 'It's so good to see you. It's so good to see you. It's so good to see you.'" This is a very interesting book about the challenge of Mount Rainier in so many different ways. How challenging it is in history, how challenging it is in hiking history, and how challenging it is still to this day to climb it. The Measure of a Mountain is a really good book. The cover price lists it as $12.95 in the USA, $17.95 in Canada, and I bought it for $6. And I think even if you found it new, it would be worth the money to spend on it. This is a good book, and it covers a really interesting topic, one I don't really cover in this channel because I'm usually not interested in mountains, or rather, I'm interested in traveling on mountains. I'm not so interested in reading about them. But this book was good nonetheless. And I think if you have enjoyed any of my nature book videos on this channel, you're going to like this one. And that's about as good a praise as I can give it. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.